And there is more smoke to the Paul George to Philadelphia rumors, this time it going down right in front of our very faces. Joel Embiid joined Paul George on the set of the pregame before Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Paul George has been a guest host throughout a good portion of the playoffs and particularly finals, and a pretty cool story where Joel Embiid got to the arena, heard that Paul George was going to be on the mic, and he said, you know what, I want to be too, that I'm going to join him on the set, that this was not a prearranged topic or kind of discussion or plan for him to be a part of the broadcast. Joel just got to the arena, heard about it, and said, I want in. And you know what? He made use of that camera time. We got a legendary little look to Paul George from a little glance, this following immediately after saying that the Sixers just need to add some pieces. And Joel was excellent on the mic. And to start with, he started off with a quote saying how, asking how it feels to see the Celtics about to win a championship. He said, quote, I can't stand them. I hate Boston. It hurts me a lot. He did follow it up saying that it's a great city, great fan base, but he just can't stand watching them win, which I absolutely love and is a great way to pander there. And then made even more of the most of it by taking a little peek at Paul George from his side eye and said, hopefully this offseason we find a way to get better. We just need to add some pieces. And I had trouble breaking down the film to get it up here on this video, particularly came in a little blurry and didn't like how it looks. So you guys can look that, making it social media circles, but we all kind of seen the legendary side glance that looks just like that. Now, Paul George felt very uncomfortable in the situation, and rightfully so, that he was kind of put on the spot here, and both Stephen A. Smith and Kendrick Perkins were feeding into this in a major way. Perkins making comments like, maybe you should be asking both these guys these questions, or Stephen A. Smith saying how, talking about missing pieces, maybe this is the guy to your right. So a bunch of comments like that, which again, I absolutely love, and for anyone that wants to throw the tampering accusations here, I think we should be celebrating the fact that Joel Embiid's eyeballs and face are working properly again. So let's pump the brakes on any sort of criticism there. Let's not forget the last time this guy was on TV, he couldn't even move half of his face. So let's just celebrate the fact that he can make a side eye before we go digging too deep into this. Now, with Embiid doing this, we all know the logic behind it. We all know the situation at hand with Paul George and the Clippers. And by the way, it should not be looked at as a coincidence that this is happening just a day after being reported that Paul George and the Clippers are reportedly not on the same page in contract negotiations. We know the reality of the situation from the Sixers' perspective, that why Paul George is in the driver's seat for being the number one option is he can straight up be a free agent. That this is not a situation in which these Sixers need to dig into their assets, trade a bunch of first-round picks, find contracts to flip to bring him in. If Paul George hits the open market, these Sixers write a check, and that man can cash it to come play here. And that is what makes it so appealing from the Sixers angle, and why Joel Embiid seems to be going out of his way to try and make it happen there. And let's not let it get lost here that Paul George is still a very good basketball player. I know he's not perfect. He has his flaws. Let's not forget that just this year, Paul George averaged 22.6 points per game, 5.2 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals per game, shot 47.1% from the floor, 41.3% from three. He shoots 45.7% on corner threes, 73.3% of his shots are assisted, and 47.6% of his shots occur from beyond the three-point arc in general. And Paul George has been very complimentary of Joel Embiid really throughout the entirety of his career. That he's spoken on his podcast a good deal about it. He made a comment saying that Joel Embiid is our generation Shaq when speaking about how dominant he can be, the way he just puts teams in a pickle with the various ways he can beat them, that if you're putting a small guy on him, he's going to dominate you. If you're putting a big guy on him, he's going to go around you or shoot over you. He makes it look that easy. He also talked about when there's All-Star weeks that it tends to be him and Joel meeting up, making conversation, and I hope that continued last night. Joel Embiid, my friend, I hope you took this man out for dinner and used the company card, because that is what it is about at this point in time. But I do want to compliment Joel for this, because in general, myself and a lot of people have been a bit critical for his lack of recruiting. That when you see these super teams form or these all-stars linking up, it happens with these types of conversations, that it's not just randomly these stars align. It takes some work. And when two guys want to play together, there tends to be a way to make that happen. And that is kind of the origin of a lot of these super teams, more so than guys just hitting the free agent market. It's with the intention of going somewhere. So with Joel Embiid seemingly going out of his way to recruit for the first time, it does feel like there's a lot of smoke here. And again, I am all in on the Paul George experience. I get he's not perfect. There's going to be things that we don't love, but think about pairing him with who the Sixers currently have. We mentioned Joel Embiid as the modern-day Shaq. Let's not forget that this dude won MVP last season and then got better this season, and overall averaging 34.6 9.7 points per game, 11.0 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1.7 blocks, 1.2 steals, shot 52.9% from the field, which is a pretty ridiculous number there, 38.8% from three. Connected on 57.1% of his corner threes this year, which is absurd efficiency and a new area in which he added to his game there. We know who Joel Embiid is at this point in time, that he's going to be a perennial MVP candidate. He continues to add layers to his game. And what the benefit of having a Joel Embiid along Paul George is, there's going to be a little bit of that balance in a way that it can take some responsibility off Joel Embiid's shoulders. That there will be nights, and Paul George, probably more accustomed to this than just about any sidekick of a star, where your number one is not going to be able to go. He has lived through this experience with Kawhi Leonard. And to be perfectly honest, I wish Joel Embiid had a little bit more Kawhi Leonard in him. And what I mean by that is Joel is intent on keeping his head down, working, being on the floor as much as physically possible. That doesn't quite seem to be Kawhi Leonard's vibe. That he has kept the larger perspective of, I just want to be healthy for the playoffs. Now, granted, this tactic has not worked out for either one of them, that they're two of the more injury-prone stars across the entire league. But Paul George has been comfortable stepping up in the center stage and being a number one option for games while being that co-star when the opportunity is right. He's a Robin that acts like a Batman sometimes, and that would be very appealing on the Sixers team. And by the way, in the entirety of this conversation, when talking about star hunting, finding that missing piece, let's not get it lost, the up-and-coming star that the Sixers already have and will be signing a max deal of his own this summer. That being Tyrese Maxey here. 25.9 points per game this season, 3.7 rebounds, 6.2 assists, which was a massive leap forward there. Also increased to 1.0 steal per game. Shot the ball 45% from the floor, 37.3% from three. Shot 61% on corner three-pointers, which is ridiculous because it's pretty legitimate sample size there. 40.1% of his shots are threes. He's still just 23 years old. He's still getting better and just answering every single question. Right now, he's on a bit of a world tour with New Balance in the NBA. He's taking part in an NBA France campaign, rocking some dreads out there, a little bit of a new look for Maxey there. You cannot help but absolutely love this kid, and he's going to fit right in. Just think about that trio right now with Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and Paul George. Sure, there's going to need to be more moves that they're going to have to round out a roster, but that's the case no matter what this big fish edition is. But I do think people are selling Paul George short on how impactful he can be. This will be the truest wing the Sixers have had really throughout the entire Joel Embiid era. That if you want to think about like the Tobias Harrises and the Nico Batums and the Ben Simmons, the Matisse Thybulles, all these guys, Jimmy Butler, probably the closest thing to it, but he's got a little more guard in him than anything. There hasn't been this pure archetype of wing, which has become increasingly valuable in today's NBA, and Paul George really being the model for a good portion of it. You see the influence on a lot of the younger generations. Guys like Brandon Miller, who mentioned Paul George as their GOAT when speaking about who their favorite player is, who they modeled their game after. That is the reality of who Paul George still is. Do I wish he was a couple years younger? Absolutely. But the reality is, this is the situation. You can sign him or you cannot, and his skill set comes at a premium. He's the type of player you're looking to model after, so just go get him. And once again, bring in the fact of you keep all those assets. If you just outright sign Paul George, you got 5 potential tradable first-round picks. Maybe they trade that 16th pick for Alex Caruso, or trade another pick package for another big-time player. And all of a sudden, we're talking about like a Tyrese Maxey, Alex Caruso, Paul George, Joel Embiid, and whoever you want to bring in on that fourth piece there as a starting lineup. That's pretty damn good if you're trying to swing a deal like that. It's a great starting place if you can get these 3 stars. And by the way, when rounding out the finality of a roster, it's pretty appealing when teams are looking to contend for a championship and you're looking at a big 3 like that. I do challenge you guys to name a big 3 that you feel much better about than that, because that's pretty much up there in my mind when looking at it. I know Boston's a little bit of a unique conversation with, obviously, they got kind of a rotating pieces. You can, sometimes it's Drew Holiday, sometimes it's Derek White, sometimes it's Kristaps Porzingis is that third. The Sixers are going to be pretty clear-cut in kind of the managing of things, so I think Boston's a little different category. But as far as outside of the league, I feel pretty good about where the Sixers stack up in that overall conversation. So overall, I love that this is the case. And for what it's worth with Paul George here, simply comes down to, what do you want, dude? Do you want to chill out there in LA, cash as large of a check as they're willing to hand you? And to note specifically what these contract implications are, that we do have this here saying, in the wake of the first-round loss to the New York Knicks, the Sixers can now create nearly $65 million in cap space this offseason, which is more than enough to fit George's $49.4 million max salary next year, according to ESPN's Brian Windhorst. George is, quote, the player at the top of their list, and Windhorst believes the Sixers will be willing to offer him a full max contract. Even if George prefers to stay with Leonard in LA, he can leverage the Sixers' interest in him against the Clippers in contract talks. The Sixers can offer George a 4-year max deal worth up to a projected $212.2 million, which is only 8.9 million shy of the most the Clippers can offer. George has the over 38 rule to thank for that. And what's especially noteworthy here is that's not a number that the Clippers seem to be willing to reach. That Kawhi Leonard signed for slightly underneath the max, and that was kind of the standard that was set, that everyone needs to eat, everyone needs to sacrifice, and Paul George doesn't quite seem on that level. And I do think it's a little funny to say sacrifice as if this dude's still not going to be cashing a $50 million a year contract, but the point being that they're not giving quite the number that would be the max. And more of that, to be perfectly honest, I think comes with ego than anything, that it's less about actually needing that money and more about being able to say, well, I'm a super max player or I'm a max player or whatever the phrasing may be. I do think that's kind of where Paul George sits, but ultimately, like I said, it comes down to what he desires. If you want to contend for a championship, if you want to put a ring on your finger, you have a better chance in Philadelphia than you do in Los Angeles. And for Paul George here, if it's about money, the Sixers are going to give you as much as they possibly can. Per the NBA rules, they're giving you the brink truck that they can offer there. So the Sixers are going to make everything possible. I love that Joel Embiid stepped out and kind of made himself in the face of the public for the first time that we have not seen. And also, by the way, it was a cool reminder that just Joel Embiid's a cool dude. That this is not some weirdo that is, off alone that I think sometimes he's portrayed at. He's relatable. He's funny. He's cool to hang out with. And, to see that on center stage, I think is valuable to bringing in talent to the Sixers team. So hat tip to Joel Embiid. I love the flirting, the tampering, the recruiting, however you want to phrase it. I do think it could have some really positive effects in the short term and long term for this Sixers team, and I do ultimately hope it comes through with Paul George. That is absolutely should be the number one option for the Sixers team, and it does seem like they are treating it as such. So let me know what you guys thought of that entire interaction. Did it fire you up? Because it certainly did to me, sitting on the couch saying, wow, there's actually something here. This might actually happen. Paul George may really be coming to Philadelphia. That was my reaction from it, and I'm still pretty fired up. So let me know if you're on the same page. Drop your comments below. Make sure you are smashing that like button and subscribing to the channel if you have not just yet. We got plenty more content coming out right here on Sixers Digest, so keep it locked and talk with you next time. Peace.